On a quiet night in the 1940s, the war could feel very far away. No bombs outside the window. No marching boots on the street. Just a kitchen lamp, a thin curtain, and a small ration book lying open on the table like it was part of the family. Because for millions of people on the home front, dinner was not just dinner anymore. It was strategy. It was sacrifice. It was the daily challenge of making something warm and filling out of what you were allowed to buy, not just what you wanted. And what many people forget is this. Some of the most unforgettable meals of the 1940s were not made from abundance. They were made from limits, from substitutions, from creative little workarounds that turned not enough into just enough. Tonight, we're going back into those kitchens. 25 wartime ration meals from the 1940s. Meals that fed families while the world was on fire. Meals that carried a strange mix of pride and frustration. And one of them, believe it or not, was an apple pie that often contained no apples at all. Stay with me. We will get there. When the United States and other countries mobilized for World War II, factories shifted, shipping lanes changed, and huge amounts of food went to support troops and allies. At home, governments used rationing to keep supplies steady and prevent panic buying. Families learned to plan around ration points and stamps. They stretched meat. They saved fat. They reused leftovers like it was an art form. They planted victory gardens and treated a backyard tomato like a small act of patriotism. Food became personal because every meal was tied to something bigger. Saving sugar was not just a diet choice. It was a war choice. Using less meat was not just thrift. It was solidarity. So as we move through these meals, notice how often they rely on the same humble tools. A skillet, a casserole dish, a saute boîte, and a determination to keep the table steady, even when the world outside felt anything but steady. The first meal is one that many families could make even when fresh meat was scarce, because it depended on something shelf-stable. Cream chip beef on toast was thin dried beef warmed in a simple white sauce made from fat, flour, and milk, or reconstituted milk when that was what you had. Then it was poured over toast to make it filling. People ate it because a small amount of meat could flavor a whole pan of sauce. It mattered because it stretched rationed meat into a real supper. The human detail is the toast getting soft under the sauce, like the meal was turning hard edges into comfort. From that creamy toast, many kitchens moved to a classic that became even more important when meat needed to last. Wartime meatloaf was less about the loaf and more about the stretch. A simple version often used a small amount of ground meat mixed with breadcrumbs, oats, or even crushed crackers, plus onion and seasoning. Sometimes grated vegetables went in too to add bulk. People ate it because it looked like a proper meat dinner, even when the meat portion was modest. It mattered because it fed a family on fewer ration points. The human detail is the careful slicing, not thick, not thin, just even so nobody felt cheated. And when the meatloaf was gone, the next meal often came from the same idea, using leftovers like a second paycheck. Leftover meatloaf turned yesterday's dinner into today's skillet supper. Meatloaf crumbled into a pan with diced potatoes and onions, fried until browned in places. It used little extra, just heat and a bit of fat. People ate it because it made leftovers feel new and satisfying. It mattered because waste was not just wasteful, it was painful under rationing. The human detail is the pan scrape at the end, chasing the crisp bits because those browned edges tasted like victory. Not every ration meal leaned on meat at all. Some leaned on the most dependable filler in the American pantry. Potato and onion skillet supper was a simple pan of sliced potatoes cooked until tender, then browned with onions, salt, and pepper. If there was a little bacon fat saved in a jar, a spoonful could change everything. People ate it because potatoes were affordable and filling, and onions brought strong flavor without much cost. It mattered because it turned humble produce into a meal that held you. The human detail is the smell of onions softening in hot fat, pulling everyone toward the kitchen before the plates are even set. From potatoes, it was a short step to a dinner built around a can that became famous in wartime kitchens. Spam hash was a practical, salty comfort made from diced spam fried with potatoes and onions until crisp. Sometimes a little canned pepper or leftover vegetables went in. People ate it because canned meat was dependable when fresh meat was rationed and harder to get. It mattered because one could feed several people when stretched with potatoes. The human detail is the sound it made, that steady sizzle in cast iron, and the way the kitchen suddenly smelled like real meat, even if it was not fresh. And what came next was even more common in homes with children, because it felt friendly and easy to eat. Beans and Franks was a pot of baked beans, often canned, warmed with sliced hot dogs or frankfurters. It was simple, sweet, and filling, and it could be made fast on a busy night. People ate it because hot dogs were often easier to find than larger cuts of meat, and beans made the pot bigger. It mattered because it was a one-pot meal that satisfied without demanding extra ration points. The human detail is the tin can on the counter, opened cleanly and rinsed because even garbage felt like something you handled carefully. From sweet beans, many kitchens shifted into casseroles because casseroles were the perfect wartime shape for a meal. Tuna noodle casserole turned one can into a family supper. Egg noodles or macaroni mixed with canned tuna, a creamy sauce, and whatever vegetables were available, sometimes peas, sometimes chopped celery, sometimes onions. If there were breadcrumbs on top, it felt fancy. People ate it because tuna was shelf-stable and noodles were filling. It mattered because it created the illusion of abundance in a single dish. The human detail is the casserole coming to the table still bubbling, and everyone waiting for the first scoop to set. A close cousin to tuna casserole was another canned fish dinner that felt strangely special in hard weeks. Salmon patties were made from canned salmon mixed with crumbs, mashed potato, or a bit of flour, then shaped and fried until browned. They were often served with simple vegetables or a scoop of potatoes. People ate them because canned salmon offered protein without the trouble of getting fresh fish. It mattered because frying created that crisp edge that made the meal feel rewarding. The human detail is the tiny bones sometimes found in canned salmon, picked out carefully on the plate without complaint because nobody wanted to waste a bite. After fish, some families leaned into the comfort of pasta, which could stretch a small amount of dairy into something filling. Wartime macaroni and cheese was often more macaroni than cheese. The sauce might be made with a little butter, flour, milk, and whatever cheese the household could spare. Sometimes powdered milk helped when fresh milk was limited. People ate it because it was warm, mild, and filling, and kids would actually eat it without argument. It mattered because it made a small amount of rationed cheese feel like a full dinner. The human detail is the spoon scraping the pan for the brown top, because that part felt like a prize. For macaroni, the next meal often arrived in a bowl, because soup could forgive almost anything. Vegetable soup from a victory garden was built around whatever the backyard produced and whatever the pantry could supply. Carrots, onions, potatoes, beans, peas, cabbage, tomatoes, and herbs when they were available. Sometimes a leftover bone added flavor. People ate it because gardens helped fill the gaps when stores were limited. It mattered because it turned homegrown produce into security. The human detail is the pot simmering while other chores went on, the kitchen smelling warm and steady like the family had control over something again. And one of the most comforting ways to make soup feel like a full supper was to add something simple and starchy to it. Soup with dumplings turned broth and vegetables into a meal that felt generous. Dumplings made from flour, fat, and water were dropped into the pot and puffed as they cooked. People ate it because dumplings were cheap and filling, and they stretched soup into a bigger meal. It mattered because flour could make thin food feel substantial. The human detail is the lid lifting, steam rolling out, and that quick check to see if the dumplings finally swelled into soft little pillows. From dumplings, many families moved to another pot that was built for long winters and tight budgets. Split pea soup was thick, warm, and stubbornly satisfying. Dried split peas simmered with onion, salt, and sometimes a smoke bone when the household had one to spare. The peas broke down into a smooth, hearty texture that stuck to the spoon. People ate it because it was cheap protein that could feed many. It mattered because it was both filling and economical. The human detail is how it tastes even better the next day when it thickens and the pot feels heavier in the hand. Another soup that did serious work on a ration table was lentil soup, often treated like a substitute for meat meals. Lentil soup with bits of ham or bacon used lentils, onions, carrots, and celery when possible, plus a small amount of pork for flavor. Lentils cooked faster than many beans, and they made a rich bowl without needing much else. People ate it because it was affordable and nourishing. It mattered because meat could be used like seasoning instead of the main event. The human detail is the tiny pieces of ham, fished out carefully by whoever got lucky, like little treasures in the broth. And if there was no ham at all, families still found ways to make a bowl feel complete. Rice and gravy was a simple comfort made from cooked rice, topped with gravy made from drippings, flour, and water or milk. In some homes, a few cooked onions were stirred in for depth. People ate it because rice stretched easily and gravy made it taste like a real supper. It mattered because it turned leftovers and drippings into something that felt rich. The human detail is the way the gravy darkens as it cooks, and the kitchen starts to smell like a meal even before anything hits a plate. From rice and gravy, another toast-based supper appeared, especially when canned vegetables were on the shelf. Cream peas on toast was peas warmed in a simple white sauce, poured over toast to make it filling. The peas might be canned or frozen, depending on what was available. People ate it because it used very little meat, often none at all, and still felt like a complete plate. It mattered because it added green to meals during seasons when fresh produce was scarce. The human detail is the toast soaking through, soft and warm, eaten slowly like the household wanted the comfort to last. Now we move into a meal that tried to look like a classic meat dinner, even when the meat portion was modest. Stuffed bell peppers were often filled with rice, onion, and a small amount of ground meat, plus tomatoes or tomato sauce. Some homes made them meatless, relying on rice and vegetables instead. People ate them because stuffing made small ingredients look generous, and peppers brought bright flavor. It mattered because it made rationed meat stretch while still feeling like a planned supper. The human detail is the pepper standing upright in the pan, like it is trying to hold itself together, just like the family. From stuffed peppers, many families leaned into cabbage because cabbage was affordable and lasted longer than many vegetables. Cabbage and noodles was a simple, satisfying bowl made from sautéed cabbage and onions mixed with cooked noodles, often with a little butter or fat for flavor. In some homes, a small amount of bacon made it deeper. People ate it because it was cheap, filling, and easy to make for a crowd. It mattered because it used ingredients that kept well and did not depend on ration points for meat. The human detail is the way cabbage turns sweet as it cooks, filling the kitchen with a warm smell that feels older than the war itself. If cabbage and noodles was a skillet meal, another classic vegetable dinner came from the oven. Scalloped potatoes, often made with thin slices of potato baked in a creamy sauce, became a wartime favorite when meat was scarce. A simple version used potatoes, onions, milk, flour, and a little fat, with cheese only if the household could spare it. People ate it because it was filling and comforting. It mattered because it let families serve a special dish without a big meat purchase. The human detail is the browned edges in the baking dish, the part everyone quietly hoped would land on their plate. And when the family wanted something that felt like diner food, but built from pantry supplies, there was always one answer. Tomato soup and cheese toast was a simple meal with a big emotional payoff. Tomato soup, sometimes homemade from canned tomatoes, served with bread topped with a modest slice of cheese and toasted. People ate it because it was quick, warm, and satisfying, and it used small amounts of rationed cheese. It mattered because it was comfort you could make on a tired night. The human detail is the spoon clinking the bowl, and the cheese pulling slightly as the toast is torn, like the meal is trying to be generous. From tomatoes, many households turned to pasta again, but this time as a meatless strategy. Meatless spaghetti with tomato sauce was often built from canned tomatoes, onions, and herbs, simmered into a thick sauce. In some homes, a little bacon fat or a small amount of meat was used for flavor, but many versions were strictly meatless. People ate it because pasta and tomatoes were affordable and filling. It mattered because it gave families a hearty dinner without spending meat ration points. The human detail is the stained wooden spoon, used so often for sauce that it almost carries the smell permanently. And one of the most surprising wartime meals was how often breakfast foods moved into the dinner slot. Eggless pancakes for supper appeared when eggs were scarce, expensive, or saved for baking. Pancakes could still be made with flour, baking powder, milk, or reconstituted milk, and a bit of fat, sometimes with no eggs at all. People ate them because they were quick and filling, and they could be topped with a little syrup or jam. They mattered because they offered warmth and comfort at low cost. The human detail is the griddle heat and the stack rising even when the pantry felt empty. From pancakes, we moved to another kitchen trick, using a little protein to make a big pot. Bean chili stretch was a version of chili that leaned heavily on beans, with just a little meat for flavor or none at all. Beans, tomatoes, onion, chili powder, and whatever scraps could join the pot. People ate it because it was hearty and it stretched across multiple meals. It mattered because it made a family feel secure for more than one night. The human detail is how the pot tastes better the next day, thicker and darker, like the spices settled into place overnight. And when there was no time for a long simmer, sandwiches became a wartime dinner in many households. Peanut butter sandwich supper sounds too simple, but it was real. Peanut butter on bread, sometimes with sliced banana when available, sometimes with honey, sometimes plain, served with a glass of milk or a warm drink. It became a quick meal on nights when supplies were thin. People ate it because peanut butter was affordable protein and did not require cooking. It mattered because it filled bellies fast and kept kids calm. The human detail is the paper wrap folded neatly because even simple food deserved to be handled with care. Now we turn to a meal that used one of the most important wartime habits of all. Potato salad with a single egg was a way to stretch something precious. Potatoes boiled and chopped, mixed with onions and whatever dressing the household could manage, often with very little mayonnaise. One hard-boiled egg might be sliced thin and distributed through the bowl, so every serving got a piece. People ate it because potatoes were filling and cheap. It mattered because it turned one egg into the feeling of abundance. The human detail is the careful slicing of that egg, like it was being rationed even after it was cooked. And speaking of clever substitutions, wartime kitchens became experts at making almost versions of familiar favorites. Mock chicken pot pie often used vegetables in a thickened sauce, sometimes with a small amount of chicken if available, then topped with biscuits or a simple crust. Many families remembered it as a way to create the feeling of a hearty, comforting dinner without much meat. People ate it because it was warm and familiar, and it used flour and vegetables effectively. It mattered because comfort food helped people endure stress. The human detail is the spoon breaking through the biscuit topping, steam rising like a small reward. Another almost recipe became famous for how convincingly it imitated something else. Mock apple pie was the one we promised earlier, and it still surprises people today. In some homes, a simple version used crackers, sugar, cinnamon, and lemon, baked into a pie filling that looked and tasted eerily close to apple, at least close enough for wartime. People ate it because apples could be scarce or saved and sugar was limited, but families still wanted pie. It mattered because it preserved normal traditions in abnormal times. The human detail is the first slice served and the quiet pride of pulling off the illusion. Now, not every wartime ration meal was about tricks. Some were simply about choosing cuts that others ignored. Liver and onions appeared in many homes because organ meats were often more available and cheaper than prime cuts. Liver pan-fried with onions, seasoned simply, could be a protein-heavy dinner. People ate it because it provided nutrition when other meats were rationed or costly. It mattered because health mattered on the home front too, especially for children. The human detail is the divided reactions at the table, some eating fast, some slow, but everyone understanding why it was there. From liver, families often swung back to the sweetest kind of comfort, the kind that felt like a morale boost in a dark week. Wartime carrot, war cake, sometimes appeared as dessert, but in lean weeks it could feel like part of supper. It used carrots for moisture and sweetness, with less sugar and fat than traditional cakes. Raisins and spices helped when available. People ate it because it gave the feeling of a treat without using too many ration ingredients. It mattered because celebrations still mattered, even small ones. The human detail is the cake cooling on the counter, watched closely, because nobody wants to cut it before it is ready. And finally, we end where many wartime meals truly lived. In the pot, on the stove, in the steady rhythm of simmering. Victory Garden bean soup was a simple bowl made from beans and whatever vegetables were available, with small scraps of meat or a bone if the family had one. It was not glamorous, but it was reliable. People ate it because it stretched across multiple meals and used whatever the household could grow or save. It mattered because a full pot meant a little less fear. The human detail is the ladle, moving from pot to bowl in the same motion night after night, like a quiet routine that held the house together. By the time you step back from these 25 meals, you start to see something that is easy to miss at first. Wartime ration meals were not only about restriction, they were about invention. They were about families learning to cook with rules and still making food feel like love. They were about stretching meat, saving sugar, and treating leftovers like a resource, not an embarrassment. But what many people forget is that these meals also carried emotion. A ration book could be stressful. A grocery line could be exhausting. A shortage could make a household feel powerless. So dinner became a place to regain control. A pot you could stir. A casserole you could bake. A loaf you could slice. A pie you could serve, even if it was mock pie. The table did not fix the war, but it held the family steady while the war raged on somewhere else. And that is why these meals still matter. Not because they were perfect, not because anyone wants rationing back, but because they show what people can do when the options shrink. They adapt, they share, they keep going. So the next time you see a simple casserole, a pot of beans, a bowl of soup, or a slice of pie that looks plain, remember the 1940s kitchens that made do with less and still found ways to feed the people they loved. In the soft light of those old homes, with the radio humming and the ration book tucked back into a drawer, dinner was never just dinner. It was endurance served warm. Staple foods, meats, beef, chicken, pork, but rationed during World War II. Bread, homemade or bakery-bought white and wheat bread. Vegetables, potatoes, carrots, cabbage, corn. Canned goods, green beans, tomatoes, peaches, especially during wartime shortages. Drinks, coffee, tea, milk, homemade lemonade, water. Sweets, sugar was rationed during World War II. Honey and molasses were used more often. Victory gardens. During World War II, victory gardens were a way for Americans to support the war effort by growing their own food, reducing pressure on the commercial food supply. People cultivated vegetables in backyards, empty lots, schoolyards, and even rooftops. By 1944, these gardens produced nearly 40% of all vegetables grown in the U.S. Clothing. Men, suits, fedoras, suspenders. Even casual wear was formal by today's standards. Women, dresses with fitted waists and padded shoulders, stockings, rationed, and practical shoes. Children, simple cotton shirts, overalls, and dresses. World War II impact. Clothing was more utilitarian due to fabric rationing. Introduced make-do and mend culture. Housing. Typical homes. Modest, often 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, wood-framed or brick. Appliances. Iceboxes, early refrigerators, stoves, wood or gas-powered. Radios, centerpiece of home entertainment. Suburbs. Post-World War II, suburban neighborhoods started booming with the GI Bill. Health and medicine. Life expectancy. If you survived childhood, your average life expectancy was about 63 to 65 years. Infant mortality rate, about 4 to 5%. Healthcare. Antibiotics. Penicillin was discovered earlier, but mass-produced during World War II, saving millions of lives. Vaccines. Smallpox and diphtheria vaccines existed. Doctors made house calls. Hospitals were basic by modern standards. Social structures. Marriage and family. Marriage age. Women, around 20 to 22 years old. Men, around 22 to 24 years old. Monogamy was the societal norm. Children. Families often had 3 to 4 children, though during the Great Depression era leading into the 1940s, birth rates slightly declined. Challenges for children. Many kids worked on farms. Schooling was more common, but education past 8th grade was not guaranteed in rural areas. Health issues like polio, scarlet fever, and mumps were significant threats. Games and leisure. Games. Board games. Monopoly, checkers, and sorry. Old Maid, Go Fish, and War. Outdoor play. Hopscotch, marbles, Red Rover, marbles, stickball, a street version of baseball, jump rope, and double dutch. Radio shows. The radio was the centerpiece of home entertainment, with some popular shows being Fibber McGee and Molly, The Shadow, and news broadcasts. Movies. Huge entertainment. Drive-in theaters became popular. 1943. Revolutionary for musicals. Huge cultural moment. Arsenic and Old Lace. 1941. Dark comedy. Very popular and adapted into a film. South Pacific. 1949. Musical by Rodgers and Hammerstein. Tackled race and war